So before we get going with this, a few things. First, yes, this isn't the match that I was expecting to post, but I was involved in this, and I know that it is EDORAS again, but it is significant because EDORAS has undergone a bit of a makeover. Now, I should say that this ends in a very similar way to the previous match in that when a winner was basically emerging, the game did crash because someone lost connection to Steam. Now, that doesn't really matter too much because the purposes of this are mainly to show off the new map of EDORAS, and there will be another replay of this up on the official Third Age Reforged channel, which, if you haven't already, you probably should subscribe to that because that's where a lot of the news comes from, the source. I'm just more of a proxy. And yeah, so this is going to be more to show off the map, to be honest, and you can expect to see more of these like replays. Hopefully I'll be able to do more of these larger replays as well. It does carry the risk of crashing more, to be honest with you, at least in terms of someone losing connection, more so than the game actually crashing now. It's remarkably stable nowadays, so yeah. Also, the other thing that I did notice was that I did pass 500 subscribers a couple of days ago, and that's very nice. I'm quite flattered that so many people actually subscribed to me. I didn't really expect to get any sort of subscribers when I started doing this last October, I believe it was. But yeah, I'm quite grateful for that. So this can really double up as the 500 subscribers special, although I would own something properly special. I'd probably plan for the 1,000 mark because I always said that was where I'd actually take it seriously to the point where I would actually make a schedule and everything like that. So maybe sometime in the future I'll get to that, but for now I'm pretty flattered that so many people actually bothered to subscribe to me and think that I'm worth watching. So without further ado, we should get into the match proper. Now, I'm going to be going through the army compositions very quickly because it is a 5v3, so there are 8 armies involved and they're all on huge sizes, so there might be a little bit of frame rate drops here and there where there's a lot of men. So there's the High Elves with all their best stuff in Ladra, Stormguard, Elder Enway, Noldor Elders are somewhere here as well. Then we also have Dol Amroth. They have their Edholland Halberdiers, a lot of javelins they've got as well. They also have a fair amount of cavalry somewhere. I believe they're down here ready to charge out of the gate. EDORAS has always been a pretty good map for charging out with cavalry, and that makes a lot of sense considering it's Rohan settlement. There's some Mithlond nobles there, and we're also up against the dwarves. So the dwarves, the High Elves, and Dol Amroth. So as the defenders with a lot of money, these are 3 factions which are very, very dangerous. Anyways, we will now be moving on to the attacking armies, and we have the Woodland Realms. A lot of their units are hidden at the moment, but you can imagine what they have. They've got a smaller army, but it has quite a lot of genuine quality in it, unlike a lot of the attacking armies, to be honest. Well, to be fair, this army over here, and poor Kuro, he was behind the settlement here at EDORAS, so he had to walk right around with his siege. He's playing as Gondor. He's got a mix of sort of lower tier stuff like the Axemen of Lasarnak, and he also has some decent stuff like the Wardens of the White Tower and some Sons of Argonath as well. Lasarnak nobles, he's also got a few units of cav to try and ward off the Dol Amroth knights that are coming out. Over here we have Isengard, so again, you know what to expect. This is a lot of trash, really, to be honest. A lot of Dunland veterans. Uruk-hai infantry are slightly better. They'll hold up a little bit better to the dwarves. The crossbows will be very useful. Guards of Orthanc are quite tough. Not very good on the attack, but they will at least not die quickly. And there's a lot of pikemen. I'm playing as Mordor again. I've basically got a legion of garbage laced with trolls, and of course Balrogs. I've got the Temple Inquisitor unit as well, to be fair. And then over here we have Gundabad, and again this is largely the same thing, only they've gone for a little bit more quality in their army. Guardians of Kharn Hammers, Trolls of Gundabad, and etc. So, with all that out of the way, let's move on. And oh, that's 6 times speed, we really don't want that, so there is going to be some frame rate drop, I fear. I've turned it up to best graphics. I'm really taking my life into my hands here. You can't have things like shadows when you've got 8 players on the battlefield. Now, the problem that I have is I picked a trash army specifically to be a buffer to an army that was slightly higher in quality. Now, the Isengard army is higher in quality than mine is overall, but basically we're still highly reliant on our numbers, so we're going to have to try and get through the dwarves based on pure numbers alone, and that's going to be a rather interesting experience. We'll see really how strong the dwarves can be. I'm firing with my troll catapult up here because I did notice there was a nice blob for me to try and hit. And some of these hits are getting kind of close, but I think I was aiming at the Tirith marksman and hoping to get some overshots. However, if we look over here, you can see that the Dol Amroth cavalry is coming out, and unfortunately these Snaga stalkers are not going to hold up well to a charge from Knights of the Silver Swan and White Knights, I believe there is a unit of. So Dol Amroth spent a lot of money on their cav. That wasn't a great charge, to be honest with you. The ram rather got in the way, but the Snaga Stalkers are still not going to do well in sustained melee against heavy cav like this. Now, the Gundabad army is in a bit of trouble here, to be honest with you, because they don't really have all that much. They have the trolls, but a lot of their units, like Guardians of Khan Doom, they're not exactly anti-cav. Now, the Blackguard, provided they can get into sustained melee, are pretty good because they're so tough, but again, the Witch Realm Inquisitors, they do have a cav unit, so in sustained melee, the Witch Realm Inquisitors will do a significantly good job. So the cav is going over here. Now, if we look back here, I did manage to get a nice hit onto these units over here, so I got some kills, I think, on the Storm Raiders and the Elder Enway Swordsmen. So that's nice for me. I was still doing, the important thing here is not to waste the artillery, because there's a lot of artillery in play. There's trebuchets, there's catapults all in the defence. Every one of the attackers, I believe, except... No, even Isengard has got that. So, yeah, there's a lot of artillery in play. For now, though, the real action is happening over here with the cav. Several trolls have died, which is not great for Gundabad. Trolls are going to be very useful in smashing through the defences later on. To be honest with you, it would have been better if the cav had attacked me, at least for us as the attackers, because I have a lot of halberdiers, and I also have lesser Balrogs, which in sustained melee can really mulch through cav, even cav like White Knights. Rudauer Berserkers, again, pretty good. Now the cav will start to fizzle out eventually, but the bad thing here is that they are getting a lot of work done against the Gundabad army, and the Gundabad army's got a lot of quality units which we could use later on in the fight in order to try and win. Now they do have a lot of shield walls up here. There's the Silver Swan Knights harassing the Snaga in the background. The Snaga are not a big loss, to be honest. But yeah, this is not great. This also means that the attack on this side is going to be a little bit limp-wristed if the Gundabad army can't weather this storm, because the Woodland Realms, they don't have numbers on their side. They're certainly more of a supporting army with their archers. The Gondor army, it does look, is splitting up to sort of attack half and half on each side. Some of the Gondor army is here just at the gate, so it can't be shot by artillery. Now if we look over here as well, my army is starting to make its way over to the walls. I'm bringing up 2 rams just with Orc Band in loose formation. I'm also retreating my catapult, saving some ammo for later on. I'm surprised that he was actually throwing his axe throwers ammunition at my Orc fodder. That's a terrible waste, because really, if the Orc fodder unit manages to absorb 1 arrow, they've already paid for themselves because they are free. Isengard is also joining me in the attack, which is good. Again, sending up all of our rubbish to just poke some holes in the wall. The good feature about EDORAS for the attackers is that you can use the ram to attack all of the walls, so you can sort of open up multiple gaps for their defense to try and deal with. Now, the dwarves are in a pretty decent position here, so it's going to be very difficult for us to make our way through this, especially considering he's got Mithril Guard, Ironfoot Spears, Erebor Infantry. All of this is very, very good indeed. If we go back over to Gundabad's plight, however, and you can see there is a lot of death over here, but a lot of it is also now the Dol Amroth cavalry, so they are finally starting to fall. But yeah, heavy cav is still very, very strong. It can mulch through a unit very, very quickly. Shield wall does help, but again, it doesn't really make up for the fact that not a lot of cav will die. These Knights of the Silver Swan, not a lot of them left. Rudauer Berserkers. The Witch Realm Inquisitors are still almost completely healthy. It does speak a lot about how good they are in cav to cav fighting. And this will be a useful unit later on in the battle, because now, of course, if we look at the settlement itself a little bit, well, we're up here. There is now multiple roads here, so there's a lot of opportunities for flanking now. The problem with EDORAS always used to be that there was really no options for the attackers. It really did turn into just a long choke point battle after the initial gate assault. There's nothing wrong with that per se, but it didn't really... All EDORAS maps really ended the same way, whereas now there's a lot more dynamism with regards to some of these roads down here, which is always good. If we look over here, I'm starting to break through the wall. Isengard is starting to get there as well. There goes the wall. There's going to be a lot of those movies showing up as the rams poke many, many holes in the outer walls. Now, the Ironfoot axe throwers are still throwing their axes at the Orc Band. Again, that's a real waste, considering that these axe throwers could be much better used against, even if they saved it for my Balrogs, because my Balrogs don't exactly blend in. They are there. The Orc Band is taking a significant amount of casualties, but it doesn't really matter all that much. Again, I'm trying to actually move the ram over so I can poke more holes in the wall, just so there's more opportunities for flanking. but you know, it's very slow, because after that they obviously take it off to the side, and also they are now moving their men into position so that they can actually stop me from doing that. Now, Gundabad have managed to ward off the cav, but they've taken a lot of losses. You know, their army is looking a little bit worse for wear. They still have some Snaga Stalkers left, unbelievably. So, you know, all hope is not lost. There's the Ballista crew and the Catapult crew. The artillery for Gundabad has been largely eliminated. You know, a few arrow volleys will now completely finish them for good, and that was a very worthwhile thing from Dol Amroth, because artillery is going to be king in this battle. Now, however, if we move back over to the settlement, there is some artillery fire coming in from Isengard, trying to soften up the Dwarven initial line. There goes the gate as well. Now, he did... well, the Ironfoot crossbows, I'm not really sure they're a good target for the artillery, just because, you know, you're not going to finish off a whole unit with a catapult, and they're still going to have their ammunition left, so... Still though, some hits is better than misses, so that's good. Now the Ironfoot Guard and the Erebor Infantry are the first line that's going to be defending against Isengard. Over here, I think he did see that I was trying to open up more holes in the walls, so he did come out of the walls with his Ironfoot Spears to take on my Orc Fodder. And these Ironfoot Axe Throwers, which I assume are out of ammo after the assaults on the Orc Fodder, but again, all Dwarven units are very, very tough in melee, and all of them are going to be very easily dealing with these Orc Fodder, but I did manage to open up 2 more gaps in the wall, so I do have some opportunities to go around. Isengard are also doing the same thing, so the assault over here is kind of really getting into it now, whereas over here we have the Gundabad army just about reaching the wall, and some of the Gondor units. Now we do have some Mithlond nobles outside the walls. That's a very strange position for them to be in. But yes, the Gondor army that's supporting the Gundabad army, which is a very good thing now, because obviously Gundabad took so many losses that we need to prop up the attack over here. The Woodland Realms are still hanging back. That's a good idea, because they are not something that... they're not units that you want to waste to the enemy archers. And if you look over here, this new archer position where the Noratirno warriors are, not great. So advancing here is going to be costly. Meanwhile, we're having to advance through artillery fire. Now, this is bad because my units are liable to break. To sort of reinforce the Orc Fodder, I did bring up some Uruks. They're much less likely to sort of break immediately. I'm also flooding into the settlement with some Orc Maulers. Now the Orc Maulers do have the potential to trade kind of efficiently with the Dwarves, because they are, you know, they're armour piercing of course with their axes. They still don't do a great deal of damage, but they are at least something which can weaken the Dwarves for the kill, so to speak. That, however, is very unfortunate. They have drawn the attention of the artillery, and they have drawn the attention of several decent units of Dwarves, so I'm going to try and quickly do as much damage to these Ironfoot Spears as I can by surrounding them. Trying to push through here. It's a bit of a mess, but then as Mordor you kind of expect a bit of a mess. There's a gap on the other side. If we look over here though, Talon Knights are out here now, and that's bad for me. I do have Orc Maulers trying to do as much damage to them as possible, but Talon Knights are a very, very strong infantry unit. I don't really have much that can deal with them other than my general unit and my trolls. And I don't really want to commit them too early if I can help it. We look over here, Isengard is also now coming into the settlement. They're leading with Uruk-hai infantry, which is a slightly better choice than Orc Fodder like I did. Uruk-hai infantry, pretty good. They will at least hold against the dwarves a little bit longer. The Erebor infantry, though, is significantly tougher than they are with their hit points. Isengard are, however, getting in and around the defences. The dwarves don't have the numbers to cover all of these gaps that Isengard have opened up. So these Dunland veterans and these Uruk-hai infantry are now in behind, attacking the Ironfoot Guard, trying to go for the crossbows, I believe. Meanwhile, we'll have a look at the other side now. We can see some units right on the other side in shield wall there. So now if we look here, there are several gaps appearing in the EDORAS walls, and Gondor are starting to attack. Now, we have the Gondor infantry. They're not terrible, but they're certainly not an offensive unit. They're very based around being a little bit more survivable, so they should be backed up. We have some Gondor militia as well, some more Gondor infantry. Now, unfortunately for the Woodland Realms, they have taken a few casualties at this point. The Dirith have taken a bit of casualties. You don't really want to lose too many men if you're playing as an Elven faction. Woodland Sentinels, in a skirmish, perhaps not the best choice because they do have very light armour, which is probably why they've taken so many losses to something like Noratirno warriors, which aren't actually a very high tier archer at all. One of the few examples of a High Elven unit that is perhaps a little bit more affordable. High Elven mid-tier units. It's the future. Linden is on the way. But meanwhile, if we look over here, unfortunately my artillery is in range and they're going for the trolls. I also have some Sauron's Will, so that is another unit that I have that's, you know, got some decent quality to it. They have hit points. They're maybe not the most survivable unit in terms of stats, but they are pretty good. Now I'm still largely outside of the walls because the dwarves did come to meet me, and the Talon Knights. Meanwhile, Isengard have managed to get into the settlement in places, so it is an interesting situation. If I can get into the settlement as well to really help Isengard's assault stick, we might have a lot of luck on this flank. Unfortunately, Khazad-dûm Reclaimers and Merchant Militia together will very handily beat Uruk-hai Infantry in melee. Although just trying to stop the Khazad-dûm Reclaimers from throwing their axes is a worthwhile thing to do. Now if we look over here, I'm about to deploy my Mountain Trolls. What I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and support his Uruk-hai Infantry and try and kill the Khazad-dûm Reclaimers to the best of my abilities. Now the Mountain Trolls, I am getting kind of stuck, but they are decent. You know, they're not as survivable as they were in vanilla, let's say, but they will still do a decent amount of damage when they're backed up, and I'm hoping that the Uruk-hai Infantry are still there in good enough numbers to actually support my Trolls. Unfortunately, there aren't many of them left. But I'm trying to do as much damage to the Khazad-dûm Reclaimers as I can, because they are a very dangerous unit. The Dwarves also have Blacklocks, so they have a lot of sort of more close ranged units, which will do a lot of damage to us if we're not careful. Now if we look over here, we can see that the... well, there's a wall going down, but we can see that the Gondorian Knights are running down several of the enemy archer units, the Noratirno warriors, including the Gondor Militia. Again, kind of a throwaway unit, but that's fine. Again, Gondor, they had the worst deployment zone right behind EDORAS, where there is still no way to get into the settlement. But they are supporting each of our armies to the side, and I do think that's a good thing in the end, because it does mean that we'll have at least something in reserve after we've taken the wars. And myself and Isengard are going to take quite a lot of losses getting through the dwarves, especially me, because a lot of my units don't have armour. They're all kind of shite. Meanwhile, my trolls, I think the Khazad-dûm Reclaimers actually ran off, so I decided to run them into the back of these units here to try and really break through. Not too concerned about these Merchant Militia. The Mountain Trolls will hold off pretty easily against them. Oh no, the Khazad-dûm Reclaimers are still there, but they didn't have any support, so I ran the Mountain Trolls back to my line. Running the Sauron's Will in here because the Dwarven Noblemen were causing one of my assaults to falter, and the Sauron's Will should at least stop the rot a little bit. Unfortunately for me though, I do believe the Khazad-dûm Reclaimers make a target of my Sauron's Will, so over here we actually have a bit of a problem in terms of my units are starting to falter. My Uruk Halberds, there's not many of them left. I still have some Orc fodder. The Orc Maulers over here are still fighting, but you know, the Talon Knights have taken a few losses, all things considered, to the Halberds and the Orc Maulers, so the trading was good, but I'm bringing up a unit of Halberds to make sure they can't flank around. The artillery is still waiting menacingly. However, if we look over here, the artillery from this flank is now starting to have an effect. More Ironfoot axe throwers. And there goes a general. The Dol Amroth general. So, the Blackroot Vale archers as well, that's a good unit to have on the defence, because you know, they do a decent amount of damage, but now they're pulling out their swords, and they will not do well against Dirith in melee. Snaga Stalkers, the first into the breach against Sons of the Fallen. That is a rather one-sided encounter. The Rudauer Berserkers will do a more decent job though. They are armour-piercing with their axes. They will probably still lose to Sons of the Fallen, but with the amount of support they're getting, the Sons of the Fallen will probably just be pushed out of the way. Only 3 Trolls of Gundabad left. Real shame that they got dealt with by the cavalry. He's running his Blackroot Vale archers back in. Unfortunately, the axe throwers are also making a target of this blob now, so Gundabad is going to be taking a few more losses. Back on this flank, EDORAS is still going to be a battle of 2 flanks, really. Now, I still have a couple of Mountain Trolls left alive, but they are slowly dying, essentially. Unfortunately, there are also some Imladris guards coming out as well. In terms of pikes, there's nothing I can offer up to deal with them, but if I can flank around them, they will very quickly be dealt with. I'm also moving my Balrogs. Now, the Balrogs are by far and away the most scary unit I've brought, but they are also very obvious in where they are. Got my Morannon Halberds up to try and plug the gap against these Talon Knights again. That's fine, and we can see here that my Sauron's Will very handily have been knocked aside. I think the Khazad-dûm Reclaimers killed them. I don't think the Dwarven Nobleman would have killed them that quickly. The Dwarven Nobleman would have killed them, but not as quickly as all that. Now I've got my lesser Balrogs running around trying to find a good entrance into the battlefield. Now the Mithril Guard have charged out the gate and are engaging the guards of Orthanc, but they are being shot in the back by crossbows, so I'm not actually going to engage them with my Balrogs. Instead, I'm going to go for these soft and squishy Belfalas Marines with their javelins. Again, potentially high damage, so I want to get rid of them. They're also going to offer up absolutely no resistance to a unit like Balrogs. There are 2 units of them in fact, and well, there's also the Khazad-dûm Reclaimers, which will very quickly be squished as well. So the Balrogs, this is really my ace in the hole. I really need to do a lot of damage with my Balrogs in order to make them worth it. If we look over here to the Isengard and Gondor front now, because Gondor are also pouring in, the dwarves have always been struggling on this front really to try and contain the amount of gaps they've left. Now there are some Edhelond halberds coming down here, so they are trying to sort of plug the gap a little bit more, but ultimately we are starting to have a little bit more luck on this front. Meanwhile over here we can still see that they have put up a much more comprehensive defence at the walls here. The Dirith, well the Lang and the Dirith are sort of coming in now, and the Sindar Blade Masters, so the Woodland Realms are coming in, and that should make this part of the defence fall a little bit more quickly.
They have lost half their men.
They have lost half their men. The Lang are a very good unit. I really like the Hiri Lang. If we look up here though, they still have a very nice defence. They have Storm Raiders on the way down and more Talon Knights. I'm starting to fire my catapult again, trying to get some hits on the Edhelond halberds and the Imladris guards, but I want to get nice hits because everyone on this map really knew that with how much artillery was in play, it could really pivot the battle based just on that. It's why Dol Amroth very quickly dealt with Gundabad's artillery to a large extent. Now over here, my Balrogs are still in combat. I've also got the few remaining mountain trolls that I have. I'm also using all of my Uruk archers to try and deal with these Edhelond halberds. They don't have shields of course, so it's a worthwhile tactic despite their decent armour. I'm also getting my Balrogs out of the way of my own friendly fire, bringing in some Uruk halberds and the Uruk-hai pikemen. Now I did actually run away here because there were mics involved, and I did hear that the enemy team wanted to get their Blacklock engineers into position to shoot my Balrog, so I did retreat them, but had they not actually said that out loud and used it in team chat, I would have left my Balrogs there and they would have been dead, because the Blacklock engineers are basically the perfect unit to deal with them. Meanwhile, these halberds are not in an ideal position. They haven't managed to get into formation, and the archer fire is raining down on them in a very big way. So that is very good for us. They're bringing down some more units, they're bringing down some more Marines, bringing down some Storm Raiders to try and hold the line here. They've also deployed some more Talon Knights. They have actually managed to push back the attack a bit on this front with these halberds, but they need some support because against Lasarnak nobles, 2 units of them, and significant amounts of Uruk-hai, they're going to fall by the wayside pretty quickly. Again, the artillery is firing. Got a hit on those Belfalas Marines. Not the most useful target to go after with artillery, but a hit is a hit. Again, back over this side. Now, some artillery has actually been destroyed, which is good news for us. Were those Witchers? Yes, they were. There are the Witchers, really firing into the sides of these Falas Lords. Again, that's a very worthwhile target to go after because they're so tough. Really being grilled alive. The Falas Lords, there's also a few Ironfoot axe throwers in here, so that is a very nice situation to use the Witchers in. Unfortunately, they are dying a little bit. They're being hit by all sorts of ranged fire, but it is a bit too late because I think they have used up all their ammo, so the smouldering corpses of the Falas Lords are now proof to their cost efficiency. More Rudau Berserkers. So Gundabad is actually making a decent push now with the support of the Woodland Realms, but the Woodland Realms manpower is likely to fizzle out faster than any one of our armies. The Sindar Blade Master is still a very good unit. The defenders are sort of running out of units to send down here though. Elder Palace Guard as well. Elder Palace Guard against Storm Raiders. That is a battle of damage, that is, but it is one that the Palace Guard will win because of their hit points. Although I will say the Storm Raiders is one of my favourite looking units, with their very large elven blades and the Imladris armour and the blue cloaks. But yeah, things are looking good on this flank. Over on the other flank, however, still struggling to break in through the gate, but you know, my army was never really about the punch it delivered, more about the pressure that I could absorb with a lot of halberds. Now he's sending in his Edelond halberds to sort of engage my Moranon halberds 1-to-1. There goes the High Elven General. And a unit of Storm Raiders, that's kind of interesting. Or was that the last remaining Falas Lord? Now 1-to-1 the Edelond halberds would usually win, but they've taken a significant amount of damage. And my units were already in formation. And now I can try and flank around them with my Balrogs. Again, charging right in again, although I didn't actually flank into them. Instead, what I decided to do was go for the Javelins instead. Because those are basically free kills to the Balrogs in melee. The Javelins in melee, I mean, they're not exactly built for this kind of thing. If they could get their ranged attacks off onto the Balrogs, it would actually be bad for me as well, so I did need to deal with them. Now, unfortunately, one of my catapults died, and they're trying to destroy it with fire arrows, but even if my catapults actually get destroyed, the trolls that are manning them are still a half-decent shock unit in and of themselves. That was bad. A nice hit on my Moranon halberdiers. My Uruk archers, I believe, are out of ammo at this point, so again, that's pretty bad for me. These Mithril Guard at the gate, I'm going to occupy them with my Uruk archers. Obviously, I don't expect them to win. And as you will see, the Uruk archers certainly don't perform well against the Mithril Guard. They're still sending men down, so this is a very admirable defence that they haven't actually withdrawn yet. Although, to be honest with you, this defence down here is pretty much lost. If we look over here, all of the archers that were over here died. Still a few units sort of waiting. The Noratirno warriors. Again, this is more of an archer position to shoot against units that are coming around the side. So there's no real need to go and attack these guys. More Noratirno warriors though. And Elder Enway archers in melee. Sending up the Elder Palace Guard, so we're now starting to advance up the hill on this side. So again, this is how EDORAS would usually go in the old days. A nice choke point uphill battle. But again, we do have the numbers advantage pretty significantly. I'm running around with my Balrogs like a madman. And I managed to get into melee against the Blacklock Engineers, which is very good for me. They didn't manage to get their arrows off in time, which means in a sustained melee against the Balrogs, unfortunately the Blacklock Engineers will be very handily destroyed. I do need to be careful of all the crossbows knocking around though. I've also got some more Uruk archers into the settlement, and I'm going to surround the Mithril Guard, sort of tie them up. This is the Dwarven General as well, so it is the one remaining enemy general. Can we see him, I wonder? There he is. King Dane in his magnificent pink armour. He's going to be occupied with Uruk archers for some time to come. Now over here we have actually one as well, so I'm now advancing up the hill with my Temple Inquisitors. At the gate I've managed to destroy the Talon Knights with my Temple Inquisitors. Again, very tough unit. So I'm going to advance up the hill with my halberds here, sort of another flanking position. And I'm going to let Isengard advance up the old road, as it were. The Witch Realm Inquisitors getting into the side of these Noratirno warriors. Easy kills. Unfortunately though, there are Dragon Slayers of Ered Mithrin over here. And there are Javelins, so it's going to be a costly advance. But again, it's best that I take the casualties as opposed to Isengard, who have some very nice units. They've got some Guards of Orthanc, and they also have some Nazkai, and also Gondor over here as well with their Lasarnak nobles. Standard Axemen as well. If you look over here, I'm not letting these Blacklock Engineers be. They will all die this day to my Balrogs. A few of my Balrogs have actually died to the crossbows, but my Balrogs at this point have more than paid for themselves, because they were the reason that I was able to smash through the gate the walls eventually on my side. The Isengard army as well, still fighting over here, so you know, the defenders have held up Isengard for longer than I actually thought they would. What is this? Looks like we've got some mounds of grass sticking out of the snow. The Mithril Guard against the Uruk archers still going on. I've got my Temple Inquisitors ready, and I've also got my halberds, so I'm going to try and attack from the side. These Axemen of Lasarnak are advancing up the hill as well. We're all attacking at the same time, which is good. It means there's going to be less waste. Guardians of Khan Doom leading the way on this side against Elder Enway Swordsmen. The Elder Enway Swordsmen should win that, to be honest with you. Having said that, they are being backed up by Rudour. The numbers are not on their side. And again, the numbers are never on the High Elves side, so there's nothing new there. Sindar Blade Masters. Over here, though, there's not a lot in reserve, to be honest with you, other than perhaps the artillery. There's still resistance down here as well. Still Noratirno warriors, but the Lang should deal with them very, very quickly. Still artillery. They're retreating their one remaining catapult that has ammo, I believe. They still have a lot of men, and they still have a very defensive position, and a lot of what we have left is looking a little bit haggard at this point. Nimrodel Rangers, not great in melee if we're honest, but they will still at least add some numbers to the front line. I've got my halberds in position over here. Now unfortunately my general was killed by dragon slayers. So if we look here, the halberds, I'm just sort of occupying this road so they can't get through. I'm also sending my Balrogs up. Now the dragon slayers are actually defeating my Temple Inquisitors in melee, so the dragon slayers, they're kind of a weird unit. I don't know what to make of them. They are very, very good, but I'm not really able to place my finger on why. But yes, they are still there. I'm trying to sort of kill them with my halberds and my Temple Inquisitors. I charge my Balrogs in to try and get some kills on the Nolder Elders because they are a horrendously powerful unit. But I was not able to do so, so now my Balrogs are in melee against Nimrodel Rangers and a catapult crew, which they will, you know, they're never going to have any issue against this kind of unit, if we're being honest. I still have a few units in reserve as well. Mainly what I have in reserve now are Moranon Halberds and Uruk Archers. Other than that, I just have my Troll Catapult, my Lesser Balrogs and my Temple Inquisitors. Isengard have still got Guards of Orthanc here and there. Now if we look here, the Axemen of Lasarnak are fighting against Noratirno warriors, so they should soften up the opposition here for the main assault, which is on the way up the road here now. We have the Wardens of the White Tower, very tough unit. They should certainly help make the attack on this road stick. We have the catapult crew, with the catapult itself. Wardens of Minas Ithil, again, very good unit. Some Lasarnak nobles. They just managed to defeat the very last resistance over here. Where's the... well, there's a trebuchet over here, which is very useful. But where are the Nazkai bodyguard? They must be around here somewhere. Here they are. Nazkai bodyguard. They're celebrating. Very, very strong unit. Could be the killing blow we're looking for. Meanwhile, over here, the Wardens of the White Tower coming in to assist my Temple Inquisitors and my Moranon Halberds. That should mean that the Dragon Slayers will fall pretty quickly. I retreated my Balrogs because they weren't going to punch through, and unfortunately for me, the Noldors were able to get some shots off on them. My Halberds, these Moranon Halberds actually impressed me with how well they were able to do in the situations I used them in. I was very impressed with how cost efficient they were. Mordor largely trash, but some of the trash can be better than others. Now we do have some Woodland Realms units over here. Looks like the Guardians of Khan Doom all fell. But the Woodland Realms units, the Lang, the Dirith and the Sindar Blade Masters, they should punch through the Elder Enway Swordsmen and the Belfalas Marines in melee. Not exactly heavy duty units. At this point they're just trying to hold us up and get ready their defence, which is pretty tough to break through. Talon Knights, Edhalond Halberds, Imladris Stormguard, a Catapult. What else they got back here? Smiths of Eregion. And that's pretty much it. Apart from that, they've got some scattered units. They also have some Haven Guard. And you can actually go down here. So maybe an attack up this road would have been worth it. I didn't actually see this road when I was playing, but then I didn't really have a easy route to get there. So that's interesting though. So there is two ways into the town centre now, so that does add a lot more of a dynamic feel to the battle in itself. So maybe it would have been an idea for the Woodland Realms to go around this way and just let Gundabad occupy the front line, because we would have got up here anyway. Now I'm starting to push through with my Balrogs and my Troll Catapult. I'm going to try and get as much damage to the Nolder Elders done as possible, because they're such a strong unit in both melee and at range that any damage I can do is worth it. My Balrogs had also basically expended their hit points at this point, so any kills would be welcome. We have broken through, and I'm going to try and support the position with some halberds. Well, at least I've broken through. There is still a pocket of resistance stopping the Woodland Realms from getting through over here. The Nimrodel Rangers, however, will fall pretty quickly to most anything we throw at it at this point, so I'm not too concerned. My halberds will still lose in melee, but they will occupy the enemy front line. But this was a very nice battle to be a part of, to be honest with you. It's a shame it crashes at the end, but by that point the victor was clear. It says the battle is very much in our favour, but to be honest, breaking through this defence with what we have left, largely garbage, is going to be tricky. We do have some artillery left, but so do they, so it's going to come down to who can get lucky with artillery at this point, it's looking like. Now unfortunately the Nolder Elders haven't taken a single loss to the assault that I mounted on them. So they are a very, very strong unit. In terms of a single all-around unit, I would say they're probably the strongest in the game at this point. I don't think they're the best single archer unit, and they're not the best single infantry unit, but as a combination of the two, you can't get away from how strong they are. They're also armor piercing as an archer, so armor piercing archers, they are interesting. Crossbows that can arc their shots, essentially. Now over here we finally broke through the Dragon Slayers, the last of them died with the Wardens of the White Tower. Unfortunately my Temple Inquisitors took a ton of losses, there's only 21 of them left. But I do still have a slew of halberds. So in terms of occupying the enemy, I still have the units to do that, and in terms of delivering the killing blow, the Woodland Realms still have some nasty looking units, as do Gondor. I believe that Gundabad still have some units left as well down here. They do have their Hammer Guard and their Black Guard. So that is 2 units which can potentially do a ton of damage. They're in shield wall moving up, that looks pretty cool. There's some wrecks of siege engines. It's really a siege engine graveyard at this point with how many that have been used. Just all over the place. Abandoned everywhere when they ran out of ammo. Isengard still have a lot of Guards of Orthanc, which is useful for occupying the enemy, but they don't do a ton of damage. At least not to the type of units we're going to be facing. If we look over here, the Elder Enway Swordsman. And that was a nice hit on the Wardens of the White Tower from the enemy catapult. They did, however, push it outside the gate, and the Wardens of the White Tower are going to be able to catch them. The catapult crew abandons their catapult though, so that is something. But now we can flank around and deal with this sort of outer pocket of resistance that is still there. My halberds are just going to sort of pin them in position and wait for the Wardens of the White Tower to come around and deliver the killing blow. Although the Noldor Elders, they still haven't lost a unit ever since I charged them with trolls. They still have 49 remaining. There goes a there goes a halberdier to the hands of an Elder Enway Swordsman. The High Elves, with the type of funds that the defenders were given in this scenario, were, you know, this is where they excel. When you make money not really much of an object, the High Elves are so strong. As are the Dwarves, to be honest with you, because if you remember earlier, when I pinned those Mithril Guard down with my Uruk archers, they are still here. There aren't many of them left, but they are still here. If you look over here, there's one Mithril Guard there. There are 3 of them remaining. Victory is a distinct possibility, but they are doing such a poor job. And if we look over here, Dane himself, the Dwarven General, still alive. Just whacking Uruks left and right with his hammer. Every swing that he gets off is a kill. He is getting stun locked a bit, but the butter knives of the Uruk archers are not doing much to dissuade Dane from his killing. Now eventually they will win, but honestly the Uruk archers have taken a lot of losses to this, and we could do with as much fodder as we can muster for the final assault on that central position of Edoras, its town centre. And I think the Nazkai bodyguard, this was a topic of much discussion on the mics, whereby the Uruk archers were not really doing a good job, so eventually the Isengard player decided to finish off the dwarves once and for all by sending his Nazkai bodyguard to deal with Dane. Meanwhile, back up here, we are finally starting to inflict some damage on the Noldor Elders. Only 5 of them have died though, but this front line should eventually swing in our favour. The Storm Guard have come out though, and they are engaging the Wardens of the White Tower. Wardens of the White Tower, there aren't enough of them really. They're a bit battle fatigued, whereas the Storm Guard, nice and fresh. Belfalas Marines as well, getting some javelins into position. So they are still coming out of this defensive position they've set up, which is understandable considering we still have some artillery left over. But this is really this is classic Edoras. This is a very one road where there's all the action taking place. So all roads lead to the town centre. I'm sending up more of my halberds because my first initial unit was basically destroyed. Just trying to again, I don't really have much of an army left at this point. I do still have my Temple Inquisitors and I do still have my Uruk archers, and this one unit of halberds is still pretty healthy. But really we do still have quite a lot of Isengard forces left. Gondor still have a half decent amount of men left in terms of the quality of what they've got remaining. We should go down here and have a look what Dane is doing, because I have a feeling he is going to be dying pretty soon because he is surrounded by Nazkai. He's still living, despite the fact he's taking multiple blows from Nazkai. And they're, all in all, one of the most impressive units in the game. Come on, Dane, succumb. There he goes. Finally he is destroyed, and I will be able to move up my Uruk archers. Despite the fact they did a shoddy job at killing off the Dwarven General, I can at least move them up to be cannon fodder for the last push. Over here there's still some Marines. Look at this. They are holding their javelins in place, but they are not loosing them. Even though they have a perfect shot onto my halberds. I'm sure they're going to. In fact, I know they're going to, so... Look at this. Well, javelins in general, I think, in Reforged have gained a level of power which makes them very useful. I think in vanilla they always had the feeling of being maybe a bit useless, because they didn't really deal enough damage to make themselves worth it. Nonetheless, they are in position and ready. The Storm Guard are kind of out here on their own with the Noldor Elders at this point. There are still a few Elder anyway, but they do not have the hit points that the Noldor have, and continuous pokes from halberds will eventually yield results. Yes, this is a very, very grindy situation we find ourselves in. Unfortunately though, the Wardens of the White Tower have largely been dealt with by the Storm Guard. They took a few losses of their own though. Meanwhile, the javelins are finally firing into the side of my halberdiers, and they're going to take a lot of losses. The halberdiers are right in view. They're not exactly the most sturdy of units. You can just see how quickly I'm losing unit models. Down to 106 already. Do I still have any units in reserve? I believe I still have my Temple Inquisitors. They're sort of in amongst the mix down here with the Hammer Guard and the Black Guard. Gundabad still have their quality units remaining, which is surprising considering the beating they took early on. Guards of Orthanc coming in, engaging the Storm Guard. The Guards of Orthanc should do pretty well against them actually. The Storm Guard are focused on survivability, but they don't have the hit points that the Guards have. Over here, the Noldor Elders still in battle. There are 33 of them left, but they're finally retreating. So finally, we have managed to kind of break through here. And I say kind of because they've only fallen back like a few feet. Meanwhile, I mean, this is the defensive position that we're going to struggle with unless we can get a good artillery shot off on them. Because the Halberdiers, the Edholland Halberds, probably the best halberd unit aside from the Fountain Guard in the game at the moment. That, however, was a very nice artillery shot. Anything we can do to the Talon Knights is very welcome. I'm bringing up my halberds as well. I'm going to try and sort of surround them at this point. Sort of get a nice line up here along the road so that we can start attacking the Imladra Storm Guard from the side and deal with them quickly so we can move on to the final assault. Meanwhile, let's see what we have in reserve. I'm bringing up my Uruk archers, as useless as they are. Gondorian Winged Swordsmen. Now, this is a unit that I do actually have something to say about. They are useful, I have seen them be very useful, but they're too expensive for what they are. Like, you would never pick them over the Sons of Argonath, which is a bit of a shame, because they are, in terms of looks, probably one of the best looking units in the game, with their Zweihanders, so I think maybe they should be reduced in price a little bit. And it doesn't have to be a lot, because they are still very effective, just a little bit, by about 100 florins I would say, and it would make them worth it. Because they are still a good unit, but I think, you know, the cost efficiency of them is in question. Meanwhile, if we look back here, they're starting to look a little bit low on troops, to be honest with you. They do still have Haven Guard, and they do still have units sort of guarding the back ranks, but over here, the front line that they have doesn't look quite so scary anymore, because it has sort of scattered because of the artillery fire. The Noldor are hiding behind this catapult to try and avoid artillery shots and archer fire. I think we will... Ooh, well, there's the archer fire. They are getting some hits, but a lot of it is hitting the catapult, so that is a bit of a shame. There's a catapult shot as well. We really want to deal with those Noldor. They've been in the combat for so long, and they still have 27 remaining, and they're still a danger. Now this is where I decide to move up my halberds and sort of try and surround the Storm Guard, so that we can really start getting some damage done, because unfortunately the Guards of Orthanc, while they will win, it will be slow going. Not that my halberds are going to do a ton of damage themselves, but even so. My halberds are in position. Now this this is interesting, because the Dwarven player has his army moving out to meet me. This one unit of merchant militia is the only dwarven unit still in play. And he is going to charge into the halberd line to try and support his elven comrades. One merchant militia. What a hero. Again, the merchant militia are meant to be sort of stand-ins for mercenary units. So that's why the dwarves have access to a unit that was previously only for Eriador. And here he goes, the mighty charge of the one dwarven unit left. And he's not even a dwarf. Charging in. We'll see the last stand of this guy. He is getting some hits off on these halberds, and he's helping to support this elven guy, this storm guard. And there goes another halberdier, but unfortunately his elf friend is dead. He is on his own against the halberd line. What a hero. And there he goes. He falls. The dwarves have fallen this day. One merchant militia. To be honest though, the dwarves did do really very, very well against us on our front. We did have a lot of men though. You know, he needed to get tons of kills, and he did, but I don't think it was quite enough in the end to blunt our attack. They did manage to do a lot of damage on the other side as well. But again, artillery was the key here, and I think our artillery actually managed to hit them where it hurt a little bit more. Most of the hits that came on my army were against units I didn't really care about. I don't know about any of the others. I can't really speak for them, but look at that. That is a devastating hit. And if we look at the percentage of kills, it's dead even, but as we know, as it goes on, the defender will start to lose more and more ground. So the battle is swinging in our favour, at least more obviously than it was. Now the Hammer Guard are going to lead the final attack. So this is going to be interesting if we speed it up as we move into position. I really don't want it to crash at this point. The Hammer Guard are going to deal with that. I'm going to also send up my Halberdiers. We look here, this is the final assault. Talon Knights, look at that. There's people just flying all over the place because of the mass. There's Haven Guard back there. The Haven Guard and the Talon Knights are really the only two units that are really of any sort of concern. I was also deciding to bring up my Temple Inquisitors at this point. The Nazkai Bodyguard are in reserve, so really we do have the melee units to deal with what they have in addition to the artillery. So I do agree with the announcer at this point that victory will be ours. So basically, the last EDORAS match, which I did a week ago, it's going to end in exactly the same way, in a crash, where it's obvious that the attackers are going to win. So at this point, it's even in the same location as well. Wardens of Minister Thiel, right on this last charge in. We may as well speed up at this point. Look at this. The Gundabad army is really just pushing through with sheer mass, I should say, and there was the replay was finished. That was where it crashed. But really there was nothing else that they could have done. There was Haven Guard there, but the Gundabad army was really pushing through with mass, and then we would have followed them through with everything we had left. So that is it. That is the final thing, and we can't see the final stats, but I can tell you that the dwarves had about 5,000 kills. And, you know, as the attackers, we got a decent amount of kills, you know, like 1,000 each. And considering it was 5v3, that's all you can ask for with the amount of funds we were given compared to the defenders. So yeah, that was pretty good. I think it was, you know, as far as balancing goes, I think maybe we had a slight advantage with in terms of like the artillery, because we were able to bring a lot as well as the defenders. But, you know, it was still a fun battle to be a part of. But really the purpose of that was to show off the new and improved EDORAS, which now... EDORAS was never the most popular map because it was kind of one-dimensional, but now, with all those roads, with multiple routes into the town centre, it should be a lot more fun to play. It's also bigger as well. It should be kind of easier to deploy, although the Dwarven player subjected us to one of the longest deployment times I've ever been a part of, but even so, I can't really blame him for that, because deploying on some of the custom maps is an experience, to be sure. But still, I hope you enjoyed that. I guess this can double as my 500 subscriber special. This is the... In terms of the amount of players involved, this is the biggest replay I've ever shown. So yeah, I hope to do more of these in the future, to be honest with you. They are a little bit more awkward to set up, but you know, and they are also more susceptible to someone losing connection to Steam and crashing the game, as was the case there. But in this case, it wasn't too bad, because by that point a clear victor had emerged, very similar to the previous EDORAS match that I was a part of. So yeah, I hope to do a few more of these big sieges. As promised, next time I will be playing as the Galadrim Elves, or Lothlorien I believe they're called now, in a defensive siege as well. You know, that'll probably be on something like Caer Andros, a little bit smaller in terms of the scale of it, but I do hope to show off what the Lothlorien Elves can do in that one. And also, as far as the next top 10 goes, now that I've done the crossbows, I will probably try and do the mid-tier infantry. It's going to be tricky to do, honestly, but I'm going to try and do it. So that's something that I'll be working on in the meantime, as doing several battles. So I hope you enjoyed this, and again, I should, you know, point you in the direction of the official Third Age Reforged channel for a lot of the news, and also a lot of the new stuff. Like, sometimes I do get the stuff before it's released as well, to the playing public, as it were, but oftentimes the Third Age Reforged channel will have these sorts of things as opposed to me directly. So I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you subscribe to Third Age Reforged as well, because that's the official channel, and as long as the community grows, the more battles we can get going and the easier it will be to play the game. So I hope you join me for the next video.